aren't dead yet, not fully. But anyway, he says, there was a welcoming party consisting of close relatives and people who had spiritually influenced him or he them. So both of my friends were prayer warriors. We'd spent many hours praying together. I'm not sure if this is why God chose those two guys for me to see, but they were significant to me in my spiritual life. Everyone I saw had been influential in shaping my life in some way. And a woman who died giving birth said, I recognized my grandmother and a girl I had known when I was in school, and many other relatives and friends. It was a very happy occasion, and I felt they had come to protect or to guide me. It was almost as if I were coming home and they were there to greet or welcome me. And that's what many say. Now, a word of warning that I feel like I need to say. Don't take a few people's experiences and shape your whole view of the afterlife. Because God has revealed in the scriptures much more, a broader, bigger picture that we need to see, and we need to contextualize these stories in light of. Because many people do talk about how their welcoming party was there to protect them. And as we'll see, just because you get a peek into the afterlife and it seems good at first, that's not always the end of the story. They're not getting a whole picture, just seeing a glimpse of a small world. And there's more to it, and it might not all be good. It's kind of like, people are used to seeing the front side of Mount Rushmore and seeing this picture, but there's another side to it that people don't often see, and it's not all good. Jesus said this, use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your earthly possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. What a home it's going to be. God created us for relationship, and he wants us to be together with one another, but first and foremost, he created us for a relationship with himself. And what people also talk about is seeing this being of light and having a life review. And what's amazing is people around the globe, young and old, consistently describe this being of light that they know to be God. Those who know Jesus know he's Jesus. Those who don't necessarily, but they're describing the same being. Dr. George Ritchie, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, died of pneumonia, and he even has his death certificate to prove it that he uses whenever he talks on this. He didn't realize he was dead as he was looking at his lifeless body when a light came into the room. He said it was impossibly bright. It was like 1,000,000 welders' lamps. I thought, I'm glad I don't have physical eyes at this moment, because he had realized he's dead. This light would destroy my retina in 1/10 of a second. No, I corrected myself, not the light, he. He would be too bright to look at, for now I saw that it was not a light, but a man who had entered the room, or rather, a man made out of light. He realized it was Jesus, who he had learned about in Sunday school, but kind of thought of as gentle and meek and a weakling. And he said, but this person was power itself fused together with unconditional love that overwhelmed me. An astounding love, a love beyond my wildest imagining. A love that knew every unlovable thing about me. The quarrels with my stepmother, my explosive temper, the sex thoughts I could never control, every mean, selfish thought and action since the day I was born, and accepted and loved me just the same. When I say he knew everything about me, that was simply an observable fact. For into that room, along with his radiant presence, simultaneously also entered every single episode of my entire life. Everything that had ever happened to me was simply there in full view, all seemingly taking place at that moment. How this was possible, I did not know. Transfixed, I stared at myself at the blackboard in 3rd grade, receiving my Eagle badge, wheeling Papa Dabney onto the veranda. Hundreds, thousands of scenes, all illuminated in that searing light in an existence where time seemed to have ceased. What's amazing is how consistent people talk about this life review in the presence of this man of light who is unconditional love, who knows everything, every thought, every motive, every deed, and yet you feel loved like never before. But why wouldn't we expect this? The Apostle John says God is love. We've never experienced love that didn't come from him in the first place. Jesus claimed that he came to demonstrate the love of God to all humanity. That he loves every person on the planet so much that he would enter our suffering and pay the greatest price we can think of paying, his life, to pay for our wrongs so that everyone who simply is willing to trust in him can be with him forever. That's how much he loves us. Jesus also said, Matthew 10, there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed or hidden that will not be made known. It says in 1 Corinthians 4:5, therefore judge nothing before the appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. At that time, each will receive their praise from God. We'll talk more about this life review, but I want you to notice what he says. Each will receive their praise from God. God wants to praise you. He wants to reward you. That's what he wants this life review to be about, a great celebration of the ways that you were lovingly faithful to him as you loved your fellow man. And you know, he has you here for a reason, for a purpose. And you know, if you've ever had suicidal thoughts, or even hearing this, you think those kinds of thoughts, don't think about it, because God has you here for a purpose. And you might not understand it, but you are here and you're making an impact. And he wants to lead and guide you in that. And it's not too late for any of us. That's what you'll see that's so amazing. This God is the God of compassion and mercy and grace. He's the God of the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth chance. And there is no one, I mean no one, who loves you more. But don't just take my word for it. I want you to hear from someone who claims to have been there. So help me welcome Dr. Mary Neal.
Thank you.
And you said you from the point your kayak got stuck, it was 30 minutes before, so you were gone that much time. And I know you said it was realer than real, but when you came back, you still were trying to figure out what was that? What kind of, talk about some of the questions you asked and went through.
I came back knowing that my experience had been real, but desperately trying to convince myself otherwise. I had great motivation to discount my experience as being a dream or a hallucination or something along those lines, because if I were to accept that my experience was real and true, then I also had to accept that everything I'd been told was real and true, including things I didn't want to accept, including the coming death of my oldest son, including some health issues with my husband, and this mandate to share my experience with other people, which is definitely not something I would have signed up for. But I spent many, many months trying to discount my experience, trying to chalk it up to being a dream, which is something, first of all, I'm not that creative. Second of all, dreams are very different. They're usually very chaotic, very poorly remembered. They involve people who are still alive, whereas near-death experiences are very logical. They're very sequential. They involve people who are already dead. They never involve people who are still alive. And the memory is very, very different. People who have had near-death experiences remember the experience as precisely and accurately 50 years later as when it was actually happening. So I was able to very quickly discount that. I considered whether it could be a hallucination from neurotransmitter release, but the chemicals that are released in a dying brain are very toxic to the brain. And the cells that are most sensitive to death are actually the ones that create memories. And so I spent many months, and in the end came to the realization that no, my experience was outside the realm of science, outside the realm of medicine, and
but not uncommon.
Very common. It's surprising that within a room this size, there are many, many people who have either had a near-death experience or had a friend or relative.
Yeah.
But they don't talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it's very personal, right? Hard to talk about.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. So take us back to that day. I mean, here you are, pinned under a waterfall. You realize you can't get loose. I mean, that must have been terrifying.
One would think so, but I felt great. I had always feared a drowning death, but actually I felt no fear. I felt no panic. I felt no sense of air hunger. I felt wonderful. And the moment that I very consciously made a choice to surrender the outcome, I truly asked that God's will be done, regardless of whether that meant I was to live or die. The very moment that I asked that, I was overcome with a very physical sensation of being held and comforted and reassured by Christ that everything was fine. My husband would be fine, my young children would be fine regardless. And I was this receptacle into which Christ was pouring his love and his very being. And that was the first of many profound aspects of this experience, because I was no saint. I tried to be a good person, but I did not deserve to be held or loved by Christ. Just like, none of us ever deserve anything. And while I was being held, my life, as you said earlier, was just laid bare for all of the high points and low points. And
so it was like a life review?
We started a life review, and it was
Is it
not
like you re-experience your life, or what? I know, we're going to go into...
It's difficult. It's all simultaneously occurring, and everything is present at the same time, and not with any sense of judgment, which is what I would have assumed would have happened. But we then at one point went through my life and looked at all of the events that I would have otherwise said were terrible or bad or horrible or sad or tragic. And I had the most remarkable experience of seeing that event, not 3 or 4 or 5 times removed, but seeing how a given event impacted me, impacted my little world and the world as a whole, when seen from a vantage point of 25, 30, 35 times removed. And what I was shown again and again and again and again is that God's promise is true, that indeed beauty comes from all things, even when we can't see it.
He works all things together for the good.
Absolutely.
So you experienced this life review. You were underwater like 15 minutes or something, and then when you came up and they found you, they started their stopwatch, and it was another 15.
Right.
So where were you, and what were you doing?
I was gone. I was still aware of the physicality of it all. I could feel the water. I could feel the plastic of the boat. My body was sucked over the deck of the boat by the current, and as my body was coming out of the boat, my spirit peeled away from my body, and eventually I then rose up and out of the river, and I was greeted by a group of somethings. People, spirits, beings, all those words seem sort of hokey to me, but
they had
these were
bodies. They were what?
They
was it like?
did have physical form. They had head, arms, legs. They were wearing these robes that were very indistinct, somewhat translucent or pearlescent, and were radiant, absolutely more brilliant than the sun, but not in a blinding sense. And they were absolutely exploding with beauty and an absolutely pure, unconditional love of God. And it's a love that we don't experience. We experience conditional love. But this was an absolute love. And they were so overjoyed to greet me and welcome me and love me and guide me. And there was a shift of time and dimension so that I could be with them. And I was trying very desperately to get down this exceptionally beautiful path to this great dome structure of sorts that I knew without any doubt was the point of no return.
So that was like the entrance to
It
heaven.
was, I feel like I was in heaven, but I was definitely in the foyer. And this was the point at which there was no return. And I could simultaneously look back at the river and see the guys pull my body to shore and see them start CPR. And I was really surprised at that point because I recognized my body as mine, as representing my life, my husband, my children. And I had a great life. I have a great life. I had every reason in the world to return. But I looked at my body and I knew I was not coming back. I knew that I had absolutely no intention to return because I was absolutely overcome with this sensation or this experience of being home, of being where I really belong, where we all really belong. It was as though I'd been on this long and wonderful journey to earth, but now I was home. I was going to sleep in my own bed. It was wonderful. And so I kept going down this path as quickly as I could. And
there was beauty
the
along.
beauty spoke to me. I absolutely believe that God presents to each one of us, just like on earth. God meets us where we are. And I believe that God presents to each one of us that experience, that scene that will speak to us and that we can understand, that will make us feel comfortable and loved and welcomed. And for me, it was color and flowers and the aroma of flowers, because that's what really moves my soul. And
Were they like real? I mean, when
it was,
people kind of still, we think it's kind of probably fuzzy.
no, it was real. But it was different, because here on earth, we feel this table and it's real. But we can't understand the table. We can't hear the table. We can't feel the love of the table. We can't experience the table. But there, the flowers, the aromas, the colors were faceted. I could understand them.
It's like you experience it in a whole new way.
In a very different way. Yeah. And we then reached this threshold, and I was there for what felt like many, many hours. And while I was there, I had many profound parts of this experience, but one of which was this sense of understanding, of getting it, understanding the divine order of everything. And one of the things that was so important to me is coming to an understanding of how it can really be true that there is a God who is real and present, and that there's a God who actually knows each and every one of us, all billions of us on the planet, loves each and every one of us as though we're the only ones, and has a plan for each and every one of our lives that's one of hope. And for me, that was life-changing. Yeah. And it should be life-changing. Yeah. And then I got kicked out. And then it was traumatic.
What did they say?
I was told that it wasn't my time. I still had more work to do on earth, and that I had to go back to my... I did what I think any reasonable person would do, and I said, I'm good. I was told everything was fine. I can stay. And as I said earlier, I'm a doctor, not a lawyer, so here I am. And as part of that discussion of whether I could stay or not, I was then told about some of the work I still had to do, including this mandate to share my experiences with other people, and the coming death of my son and some other things. And then I was taken back down this path and reunited with my body.
And I think it's important because so many people would say, well, why wouldn't God give us all that experience, right? I mean, that would make it so much easier, right?
Well, it would. And I've had many, many people say, gee, I really would love to have your experience. But what they're really saying is, I'd like the spiritual experience, but I don't really want to drown or break my legs or do any of that.
The coming back. Yeah.
And I asked that question for a long time.
Yeah, because, I mean, in your book you write
absolutely
about seeing Jesus and asking him, why doesn't everybody have this experience?
And the fact is, there is great power in using the free will and free choice with which we're created. And even Thomas, if you go back to the Bible, I mean, Thomas was like me. He wanted to stick his finger in the hole, and Christ said, blessed are those who believe and have not seen. And I said for many years...
And he said the same thing to you?
He did. And for many years I said that, I lost my faith, and I was very sad about that.
What do you
mean?
But
it was replaced with a trust.
Oh.
Because it was replaced with knowledge. But the fact is, even though Christ said that, and even though it is true, I would say that actually everybody can see. Because I absolutely believe that although not everyone's going to have the dramatic experience I had, every single person can experience God's presence in their life and experience God's miracles if they look for them, if they acknowledge them for what they are.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hear more from Dr. Neal. So we're going to videotape her, and throughout the weeks we're going to have little segments as well, and we'll post the whole thing somewhere. But let's thank Dr. Neal for taking the time to be here. Thank you so much. you.